A destitute single mother gave her last cookie to a grieving biker, unaware he was the secret billionaire who owned her entire city. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises, or we will remove you by force. The rain hammered down on the glass of the single window like 1,000 desperate fists, relentless and wild. Elara pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around her daughter's small, sleeping form, the thin wool doing little to ward off the biting cold that seemed to seep through the very walls of the crumbling apartment. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the cramped, sparse room for a split second before darkness swallowed it whole, revealing peeling paint, a water stain blooming like a ghostly flower on the ceiling, and the hollow, weary look in Elara's own eyes reflected in the dark pane. She was so tired. Her heart thudded a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of despair that had become the soundtrack to her life. The final notice, a crisp, cruel piece of paper, lay on the rickety kitchen table, its words seared into her memory: final eviction warning. The landlord, a man named Silas Croft whose smile never reached his cold, calculating eyes, had been merciless. He had sneered at her pleas, at her promises to pay back every cent as soon as she found a new job. He saw only a liability, a stain on the property he was so eager to gentrify. He didn't see a mother trying to shield her 6-year-old child from a world that had grown increasingly harsh. He didn't see the quiet dignity with which she faced each new wave of hardship, or the unwavering love that was the only real warmth in their lives. He saw nothing. A soft sigh escaped Lily's lips as she shifted in her sleep, her small hand instinctively reaching out to clutch a fold of Elara's worn sweater. Looking at her daughter, Elara felt a familiar, seismic wave of love so fierce it momentarily eclipsed the fear. Lily was her world, her reason, the pure, innocent light in her shattered life. Her hair, the color of spun gold, fanned out across the lumpy pillow, and her face, even in sleep, was a portrait of perfect trust. How could she tell this precious child that they had nowhere to go? That the tiny room which constituted their entire universe was about to be ripped away? A sob caught in Elara's throat, a raw, painful thing she quickly swallowed down. She would not cry. She would be strong for Lily. She had to be. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the tempest in her soul. She remembered a time when the sound of rain was comforting, a gentle lullaby that promised cozy nights spent reading stories and drinking warm tea. Now it was just another reminder of their vulnerability, of the cold that awaited them on the streets. Her gaze fell upon the small, chipped ceramic jar on the counter. The Adventure Fund. It held a pitiful collection of coins, saved one by one for a promised trip to the city zoo, a trip that now seemed as distant as a star. She had failed. The thought was a splinter of ice in her heart. She had worked 2 jobs, cleaned houses for people who looked through her as if she were invisible, and served coffee with a steady smile even when her feet were screaming in protest. It was never enough. Her husband, taken by a sudden illness 2 years prior, had left a void not just in their hearts, but in their finances, a chasm of debt from which she could not seem to climb. She was alone. Elara rose from the edge of the bed, her movements quiet and deliberate. She walked to the window, her breath fogging the cold glass. Below, the streetlights cast long, watery golden glows on the slick, black asphalt. The world looked blurry, distorted, just as her future felt. She rested her forehead against the cool surface, closing her eyes. She sent a silent, desperate prayer into the storm, a plea for a miracle, for a sign that they were not forgotten. She didn't ask for wealth or an easy life. She asked only for a chance, a way to keep her daughter safe and warm. A way to keep her promise that everything would be okay. The rain continued its relentless hammering. Total silence answered. The next morning, the rain had softened to a persistent, dreary drizzle, cloaking the city in a heavy fog. Elara had spent the night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing, but no solution had presented itself. The eviction was in 2 days. Her final paycheck from the diner she'd been unjustly fired from, after a wealthy customer complained she wasn't smiling enough, was barely enough for a few days of food. Despair was a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. But then Lily woke up, her eyes bright and full of innocent morning cheer, and the world shifted back into focus. For Lily, she would find a way. For Lily, she would fight. "Mama, is it a pancake morning?" Lily asked, her voice still thick with sleep, a hopeful lilt in her tone. Elara's heart cracked. Their pantry held only half a box of crackers and a single can of soup. "Not today, my sweet girl," she said, her voice gentle, betraying none of the panic churning inside her. "But I have a special surprise for you later." The lie felt like ash in her mouth, but Lily's resulting smile was worth the sin. After a meager breakfast of crackers, Elara knew she had to do something, anything, to see that light in her daughter's eyes for a little while longer. She counted the coins from the adventure fund. $4.67. It was supposed to be for the giraffes and monkeys. Instead, it would be for one perfect, solitary moment of happiness. "How about we go get the best chocolate chip cookie in the whole wide world," she proposed. Lily's gasp of pure joy was the only answer she needed. They walked to the small corner diner, Lily's hand tucked securely in hers. The air was damp and cold, but Lily's excited chatter was a bubble of warmth around them. The diner was mostly empty, the sterile silence broken only by the soft hush of the rain outside and the clink of cutlery from the kitchen. Elara ordered one large cookie and a glass of water. As the waitress placed the plate on the table, Lily's eyes went wide. The cookie was huge, still warm from the oven, its surface a landscape of molten chocolate peaks. It was an extravagance they couldn't afford, a reckless act of love in the face of ruin. And it was worth every single penny. As Lily prepared to take her first, momentous bite, her eyes drifted to a man sitting alone in a booth by the window. He was large and imposing, dressed in worn leather from head to toe. His hair was long, tied back, and his beard was streaked with gray. He looked like the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid. But it wasn't his appearance that held Lily's attention. It was the look on his face. He was staring down at a small, framed photograph, his shoulders slumped, and his eyes, even from across the room, looked haunted, shattered. A profound, unbearable sadness seemed to emanate from him, a fog as thick as the one outside. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Lily watched him for a long moment, her own cookie forgotten. Elara saw the shift in her daughter's expression, the flicker of pure, selfless empathy that was so central to her nature. "Mama," Lily whispered, her voice soft, "that man looks so sad." Elara's first instinct was protective. "It's all right, sweetie. Just eat your cookie," but Lily wasn't listening. She was looking from the sad man to her perfect, wonderful cookie, a silent calculation happening in her innocent mind. Before Elara could react, Lily slid out of the booth. She clutched the plate with both hands, the cookie almost as big as her face, and walked with steady, unwavering steps toward the stranger. Elara froze. "Excuse me, mister," Lily's small voice cut through the quiet diner. The biker looked up, his eyes seeming to pull back from a great distance. They were red-rimmed, hollow with a grief so deep it was startling. He looked at the little girl standing before him, holding a plate with a cookie. He seemed confused, as if he couldn't quite process the image. "You look like you need this more than me," Lily said, her voice sincere and clear. She pushed the plate onto his table. "It's very good. It has extra chocolate." Elara had started to rise, a mortified apology on her lips, but the look on the man's face stopped her. It was a look of utter, stunned disbelief. A seismic shift was occurring behind those haunted eyes. He stared at the cookie, then at the little girl, and a single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. He didn't speak. He just stared. The man, whose name was Jackson Thorne but was known only as Jax to the men he rode with, had been coming to this diner every year on this exact day. It was where he had celebrated his own daughter Maya's 6th birthday, just weeks before a sudden, aggressive illness had snatched her from his life. The photograph he was staring at was of her, smiling, with a smudge of chocolate on her nose. He came here to drown in his grief, to sit in the sterile silence and let the pain consume him. The world had become a transactional, cynical place since she'd been gone. His vast fortune, his gleaming empire, meant nothing. It was all hollow, a cavernous monument to his failure to save the one person who mattered. He had retreated into the persona of Jax, the hardened biker, a shell to protect the shattered man inside. And then this child appeared. This small, golden-haired angel, offering him her only treasure without a hint of expectation. It was an act of such pure, unadulterated kindness that it splintered the thick wall of ice that had encased his heart for 3 long years. He saw his own Maya in her innocent eyes, in her selfless gesture. It was a sign, a light in the profound darkness. He finally found his voice, though it came out as a rough, cracked whisper. "Thank you," he managed to say, the words feeling foreign and inadequate. Lily simply gave him a small, gentle smile and turned to walk back to her mother. Jax watched her go, his hand trembling as he reached for the cookie. It felt sacred. He knew, with an undeniable certainty that shook him to his core, that he could not let this go. He had to find out who this child was. He had to repay this impossible debt. Elara quickly paid the bill with the last of her coins, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She took Lily's hand, avoiding the biker's intense gaze, and hurried out of the diner. The brief, momentary connection felt charged, significant, but the harsh reality of their situation came crashing back the moment the cold air hit them. The cookie was gone. The money was gone. All that remained was the eviction notice and the ticking clock. As they walked home, a new wave of hardship was already gathering on the horizon, preparing to break. They were gone. When they returned to their apartment building, the world tilted on its axis. Silas Croft was there, standing by their door, his arms crossed over his chest. He was not alone. 2 large, imposing men stood behind him, their expressions blank and menacing. Croft's lips were twisted into a cruel smirk. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Enjoying a nice walk, are we? I was just explaining to my associates here that you've been a little forgetful about your financial obligations." Elara's blood ran cold. She instinctively pulled Lily behind her, shielding her daughter with her body. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice trembling but steady, "I told you, I just need a little more time. I'll have the money." Croft let out a short, barking laugh. "Time is money, my dear. And you're all out of both." He took a step forward, invading her personal space. "I've been lenient. I've been patient. But my patience has run out. The new owners of this building want all the dead weight gone, and you, my dear, are the deadest of weight." His words were like stones, each one a sharp, painful blow. He gestured to the notice on her door. "That was a final warning. This is the follow-through. You have 24 hours. Not a minute more. By noon tomorrow, I want you and your baggage," he said, glancing dismissively at Lily, "out of my property. If you're not, these gentlemen will be happy to assist you." The 2 men took a synchronized step forward. It was a clear, brutal threat. Elara stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was a living thing inside her, a frantic bird beating its wings against her ribs, but she would not let him see it. She would not give him the satisfaction. "You can't do this," she said, her voice low and unwavering. "It's not legal. There are procedures." Croft's smirk widened. "Oh, I assure you, I have all my legal ducks in a row. You are in breach of contract. The law is on my side. The side with the money." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "A piece of advice. People like you don't win against people like me. Just take what little you have and vanish. It will be easier for everyone." He then turned on his heel and walked away, his 2 enforcers following like loyal hounds. The sharp click of the lobby door closing echoed in the sudden, heavy silence. She was shattered. Back in the diner, Jack sat motionless for a long time, the warmth from the cookie long since faded. The little girl's selfless act had been a flash of lightning in his dark world, illuminating a path he hadn't realized he was searching for. It reawakened a part of him he thought was dead, his purpose. For years, his wealth had been a burden, a constant reminder of all the things it couldn't buy, his daughter's health, his own peace. Now, for the first time, he saw it for what it could be, a tool. A tool to protect the innocent, to reward the virtuous, to right the wrongs of a cruel world. He had a new mission. He had to find that little girl and her mother. He pulled out his sleek, state-of-the-art smartphone, a stark contrast to his rugged appearance, and made a call. "Harris," he said, his voice now commanding, crisp, devoid of the biker's gravelly tone. "I need you to do something for me. I'm at the Oak Street Diner. A woman and a little girl, maybe 6 years old, golden hair, just left. They paid in cash. I need you to access the diner's security footage, get a clear image of them, and find out everything you can. Their names, where they live, their situation. Everything. And I need it an hour ago." There was a pause on the other end, then a simple, "Yes, Mr. Thorne." Jax hung up. The hidden savior was now in motion, and his first act would be one of quiet observation. He took a single bite of the cookie. It tasted like hope. Within the hour, a comprehensive file appeared on his phone. Elara Vance and her daughter, Lily. The details of her life were laid bare: the death of her husband, the mountain of medical debt, the recent job loss, the slum building she lived in, and the name of the notoriously predatory landlord, Silas Croft. The final eviction notice was even mentioned in the property manager's notes. A cold, precise anger began to build in Jax's chest. The world had been relentlessly cruel to this dignified woman and her kind-hearted child. He decided then and there that the world was about to change. His first interventions were anonymous, designed to alleviate the immediate pressure without revealing his hand. That evening, as Elara sat at her table, her head in her hands, trying to figure out how to stretch a can of soup into 3 more meals, her phone buzzed. It was an email from the power company. It was a payment confirmation. Her entire overdue balance, a sum so large she couldn't even bear to look at it, had been paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. It had to be a mistake. A glitch in the system. But the confirmation number was there, official and undeniable. A tiny, fragile seed of hope began to sprout in the barren soil of her despair. The next morning, she opened her door to find 2 large bags of groceries sitting on her welcome mat. They were filled with everything she could have dreamed of: fresh fruit, vegetables, milk, eggs, bread, and even a small box of pancake mix. Tucked inside was a brand new, fluffy teddy bear holding a single, perfect sunflower. There was no note. No indication of who it was from. Elara stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her face, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. She looked up and down the empty corridor, half expecting to see an angel. She didn't know that from a black, unmarked car parked across the street, Jackson Thorne was watching, his expression unreadable. He saw her tears, her confusion, her relief. This was good. This was a start. But it wasn't enough. He needed to get closer. He needed to understand the woman who had raised such an extraordinary child. He formulated a plan. The next day, he shed the tailored suit of Jackson Thorne and once again donned the worn leather of Jax. He rode his custom, gleaming Harley-Davidson, a machine that was worth more than the entire apartment building, and parked it at the curb right in front of Elara's residence. He popped the hood of the engine compartment, feigning a breakdown. For the next 3 days, he became a fixture on the street, tinkering with the perfectly functional engine, a quiet, brooding presence. The neighbors gave him a wide berth, whispering about the rough-looking biker who had suddenly appeared in their neighborhood. But Jax wasn't interested in them. He was waiting. On the 3rd day, Elara and Lily emerged from the building. Lily was the one who spotted him first. Her eyes lit up with recognition. "Mama, look," she exclaimed, tugging on Elara's hand. It's the sad man from the diner. Ilara's breath caught. She looked over and saw him, grease smudged on his cheek, a wrench in his hand. He looked up, and their eyes met. He offered a small, hesitant nod. Ilara, propelled by her daughter's innocent courage and her own profound gratitude for the anonymous gifts she was sure must be a form of divine intervention, felt she couldn't just walk away. She walked towards him, Lily practically skipping at her side. "Is everything all right with your bike?" Ilara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Jax looked up from the engine, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Just some trouble with the carburetor," he lied smoothly. "She's an old girl. Temperamental." He looked at Lily and a genuine, gentle smile touched his lips for the first time. "Hello again," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you for the cookie. It was the best I've ever had," Lily beamed. "I told you it had extra chocolate." An easy, unexpected quiet settled between them. Ilara found herself studying him, seeing past the intimidating exterior to the deep sadness that still lingered in his eyes. It was a sadness she recognized, a grief that felt familiar. "My name is Ilara," she offered, extending a hand. He took it, his grip surprisingly gentle. "Jax," he said simply. The lie felt necessary, a shield for them both. Over the next few days, this became their routine. Ilara and Lily would stop to talk to him on their way to the park. He learned that Lily loved to draw and that her favorite animal was a red panda. He saw the fierce, protective love Ilara had for her daughter, and the quiet, dignified strength with which she carried herself. He was falling, not just for the idea of them, but for the reality. One afternoon, as Lily drew pictures with a piece of chalk on the sidewalk, Jax and Ilara sat on the steps of the building. The conversation drifted, as it often did, into more personal territory. "You always seem to have this profound look in your eyes," Ilara said quietly, not as an accusation, but as a simple observation. "Like you're 1,000 miles away." Jax was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the faded photo of Maya he kept tucked in his leather vest. He decided, in that moment, to share a piece of his shattered heart. "I had a daughter," he began, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. "Her name was Maya. She would have been 9 this year." This was the beginning of the confession, the forging of a bond over shared tragedy. He told her everything. About Maya's bright, infectious laugh, her love for stargazing, and the sudden, brutal fever that had stolen her away. He spoke of the cavernous silence she left behind, a silence that his money and power could never fill. He didn't mention the billions, the boardrooms, or the empire. He spoke only as a father, raw and vulnerable, his grief a palpable presence between them. Ilara listened with unwavering, steady eyes, her own heart aching with a deep, resonant empathy. She didn't offer empty platitudes or tell him it would get better. She simply listened, creating a sacred space for his pain. When he finished, a single tear tracked down his cheek, the second one he had shed in years. She didn't wipe it away. She just sat with him in the silence. Then, she responded with a simple, empathetic gesture. She stood up, went inside, and returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs of hot tea. She handed one to him, her fingers brushing his. The warmth of the mug seeped into his cold hands. It was a small thing, a quiet act of care, but to Jax, it felt monumental. It felt like being seen. Then, it was her turn. Bolstered by his vulnerability, Ilara shared her own story. She spoke of her husband, Mark, of their dreams of opening a small bookstore, of the love that had been the anchor of her life. She described the shock of his diagnosis, the helplessness of watching him fade away, and the crushing weight of the medical bills that remained like a cruel postscript to their love story. She confessed her fears about the eviction, about failing Lily, her voice cracking for the first time. Jax listened, his jaw tight with a protective anger he directed not at her, but at the world that had been so unkind. He saw the full picture now, 2 souls, shattered by loss, trying to navigate the wreckage. A bond was forged on that stoop, a profound, unspoken connection woven from shared grief. When she finished her story, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears, he didn't offer a grand solution. He simply placed his hand gently on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, of shared humanity. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, Elara," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You are not going to fail." He meant it as a promise. A promise he had every intention of keeping. He knew the confrontation with Silas Croft was imminent. He knew it would be ugly. And he knew he would be there to end it. The day of the eviction arrived like a death sentence. The sky was a grim, unforgiving gray, spitting a cold, miserable drizzle. At precisely noon, a large, unmarked van pulled up to the curb. Silas Croft emerged, a triumphant sneer plastered on his face. His two thugs from before followed, carrying empty boxes. They didn't even knock. Croft used his master key, and the door to Elara's apartment swung open with a sickening click. "Time's up," he announced to the terrified mother and child inside. Elara stood in the middle of the room, Lily clinging to her leg, her small body trembling. She had packed one small suitcase with their most essential belongings, a few changes of clothes, Lily's favorite worn teddy bear, and a framed photo of her husband. Everything else was about to be lost. The public humiliation began. Croft's men worked with a cold, efficient brutality. They started throwing her meager possessions out onto the wet sidewalk. A chipped mug shattered on the pavement. A small stack of Lily's crayon drawings fluttered in the damp wind before being trampled underfoot. A worn armchair, the place where Elara had rocked Lily to sleep 1,000 times, was tossed out, landing with a heavy, final thud. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. No one dared to intervene. Croft was a powerful man in their small world, and his cruelty was well known. He was making an example of her. Elara remained dignified, her back straight, her expression a mask of pained resolve. But inside, she was splintering. Each discarded item felt like a piece of her life being ripped away and thrown in the gutter. This was more than an eviction, it was a violation, a deliberate act of degradation. Croft seemed to savor her silent suffering. He walked over to a small, wooden box on the mantelpiece. It was Mark's. It held his wedding ring, his favorite watch, and the last letter he had written to her. "What have we here?" Croft mused, picking it up. Sentimental trash, he made to toss it out with the rest. "No." Elara cried out, her composure finally cracking. She lunged forward to grab the box. "Please, not that. It's all I have left of him." Croft shoved her, hard. Elara stumbled backward, tripping over a discarded lamp, and fell to the hard floor. The fall wasn't severe, but the shock and humiliation of it sent a sharp gasp through the crowd of onlookers. Lily screamed. A raw, terrified sound that cut through the air. "Mama!" Seeing her mother on the ground, seeing the monster looming over her, something inside the little girl snapped. Her fear was eclipsed by a desperate, primal need to find help. She saw them then. At the end of the street, parked in a silent, formidable line, was a row of gleaming motorcycles. And leaning against the lead bike was Jax, his face like thunder. Lily ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her little legs pumping, her lungs burning. The rain plastered her golden hair to her face. Tears streamed from her eyes, mixing with the drizzle. She didn't stop until she reached the bikers, her small chest heaving with sobs. She grabbed onto Jax's leather-clad leg, her tiny hands clenching the material. "Please," she gasped, her voice choked with terror. "You have to help. They're beating my mama." A change came over Jax. The quiet, grieving man vanished, replaced by a commanding, powerful presence. A cold, dangerous calm settled over him. He looked at his crew, a silent order passing between them. He swung his leg over his bike. The engines roared to life in perfect, deafening unison, a sound like rolling thunder that made the entire street vibrate. Everyone froze. Silas Croft looked up, his sneer faltering as he saw the procession of a dozen powerful motorcycles rolling slowly, deliberately, toward him. They were a vision of leather and chrome and righteous fury. They formed a semicircle around a pathetic pile of Alara's belongings, their engines idling with a menacing growl. The salvation had arrived. Jax dismounted, his movements fluid and precise. He walked toward Croft, his heavy boots making no sound on the wet pavement. He didn't look angry. He looked something far more terrifying, certain. He completely ignored Croft, his eyes fixed only on Alara, who was now being helped to her feet by another one of the bikers. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through the tension. Alara could only nod, her mind reeling in disbelief. He then turned his gaze to Silas Croft, and for the first time, Croft felt a sliver of genuine fear. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Croft blustered, trying to regain his footing. "This is a private matter. Get off my property before I call the police." Jax let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "Your property?" he said, the words laced with cold steel. "That's a funny choice of words." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up for Croft to see. It was the front page of a major financial news website. The headline read, "Thorn Industries finalizes acquisition of Northgate Property Holdings in multi-billion-dollar deal." Croft's face went pale. He knew Northgate. They were the faceless corporation that owned this entire block. "I don't understand," Croft stammered. Jax's expression remained impassive. "Let me make it simple for you," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "My name is Jackson Thorne. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I am the new owner of this building. And this one," he gestured to the building next door, "and the one after that. In fact, I own this entire street." The revelation hung in the air, electric and stunning. The neighbors gasped. Alara stared, her mind struggling to connect the kind, grease-stained biker with the formidable billionaire on the phone screen. It was impossible. It was happening. "So, you see," Jax continued, taking a slow step closer to the trembling landlord, "you are not on your property. You are on mine. And you," he pointed a finger at Croft's chest, "are trespassing. You are harassing my tenants. And you put your hands on the mother of the little girl who showed me more kindness in 5 minutes than I have seen in 3 years." He turned to his men. "Harris, call the police. I want to press charges for assault, trespassing, and destruction of private property. And then call our legal team. I want the property management company you work for, Mr. Croft, to have their contract terminated, effective immediately. I also want a full audit of their books. I have a feeling we're going to find a long history of this kind of behavior." Croft was speechless, his face a mask of slack-jawed horror. His power, his authority, had vanished in an instant, dismantled by a few quiet words. The two thugs who had been so menacing just moments before were now backing away slowly, wanting no part of what was to come. Jax turned his back on the ruined man, his focus entirely on Alara and Lily. He knelt down so he was at Lily's eye level. "No one will ever hurt you or your mama again," he said, his voice filled with a tender, unwavering promise. "I swear it." He then looked at Alara, his eyes communicating everything he couldn't yet say. The complete reversal of power was absolute. He was their savior. The resolution was swift and total. The police arrived and escorted a sputtering, defeated Silas Croft away in handcuffs. Jax's men, who Alara now understood were not just bikers but loyal employees and friends, began to carefully and respectfully carry her belongings back into her apartment. But they didn't just put them back. A large moving truck, which had been waiting discreetly around the corner, pulled up. Within hours, the threadbare armchair was replaced by a plush, new sofa. The rickety table was swapped for a polished, sturdy wooden one. A new bed, a new refrigerator filled with food, new clothes for both her and Lily. It was an overwhelming, dizzying flood of security and care. That evening, the apartment was transformed. It was warm and bright, filled with the scent of a home-cooked meal that one of Jax's men, a surprisingly skilled chef, had prepared. Lily was asleep in her new bed, tucked in with her new teddy bear, a contented smile on her face. Elara and Jax sat in the quiet living room, the city lights twinkling outside the window. The storm had passed, both outside and in. Why? Elara finally asked, the single word holding a universe of questions. Why all of this? Jax looked at her, the last vestiges of the hardened biker persona gone, leaving only the man, Jackson Thorne, vulnerable and sincere. Because your daughter gave me a cookie when my soul was starving, he said, his voice raw with emotion. She reminded me that there was still good in the world. That there was still light. And you raised her. In the middle of all this hardship, you raised a child with a pure, selfless heart. You showed me what real strength is. My life was hollow, Elara. A big, empty, gleaming mansion full of ghosts. You and Lily filled it. You gave me a reason to use what I have for something other than just making more. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. This isn't charity. It's hope. For me, he paused, his gaze unwavering. I think I'm falling in love with you, Elara Vance. A fresh wave of tears, this time of cathartic, unbelievable joy, slid down Elara's cheeks. She didn't pull her hand away. She squeezed his back. Hope was real. 1 year later. The golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the large bay window of a beautiful, stately home, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room was filled with books and the scent of fresh flowers. Laughter echoed from the lush green lawn outside. Elara, her face relaxed and radiant, watched from the window. Jax was on the grass, giving Lily a piggyback ride, her delighted squeals carrying on the warm breeze. They were a family, forged not by blood, but by a shared history of pain and a miraculous, life-altering act of kindness. The hollow look in Elara's eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, steady glow of contentment. The haunted expression that had shadowed Jax's face for so long had vanished, erased by love and a renewed sense of purpose. Today was a special day. They were standing in front of a newly constructed, gleaming building in the heart of the city. A large, crimson ribbon was stretched across the entrance. A crowd of reporters and community members had gathered. A polished brass plaque on the wall read, "The Maya and Lily Community Center for Single Parents." It was Jax's vision, funded by his wealth but built on Elara's experience and compassion. It offered temporary housing, job training, childcare, and counseling, all the things Elara had so desperately needed. It was a monument to their journey, a promise that no one else would have to face the darkness alone. As Jax handed Elara the ceremonial scissors to cut the ribbon, he leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." She smiled, a real, brilliant smile that lit up her entire being. Their happily ever after was not just an ending, but a new, beautiful beginning. This story is a testament to the profound, almost magical power of a single, selfless act. It reminds us that in a world that can often feel cold and transactional, the purest form of currency is kindness. A mother, pushed to the brink of despair, and a man, lost in the cavernous echo of his own grief, were brought together by the innocent gesture of a child. It was a moment that cost a cookie but purchased a future, proving that the light we offer to others has a way of finding its way back to illuminate our own darkest paths. It is a fable of hope, a whisper that even when we feel most alone and powerless, we have the capacity to spark a miracle in someone else's life, and in doing so, redeem our own. If this story touched your heart, and if you believe in the power of love and kindness to heal the deepest wounds, please let us know. These tales are more than just stories, they are reminders of the goodness that resides within all of us, waiting for a chance to shine. They are a celebration of the human spirit's resilience and its unwavering capacity for compassion, even in the face of unbearable hardship. We invite you to join our community of viewers who cherish soul-stirring narratives like this one. Please like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more inspiring stories that will warm your heart and renew your faith in humanity. We'll see you in the next one.